The Army Combat Fitness Test is going out the door and being replaced with the Army Fitness Test, or the AFT. Now, I did do a video covering this, and if you want to check that out, there's a link down in the description box down below. But in that video, I did not yet cover what are the scoring standards, as there are different standards in this new fitness test. So let's cover those. Now, in that previous video, I had mentioned that with the new standards, it makes it to where if you are in a combat MOS, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, it's the same standards. I also think I mentioned in that video saying it didn't matter on your age. Well, that actually is not true. It does matter your age. There are different standards based on your age, but we're gonna be focusing on the standards for that range. If you're someone who's new to the Army, you just came in, maybe you're 18 years old, 19 years old, because the standard for 17 to 21 is the same. If you are older than 21, then just know that maybe some of these standards drop a little bit, maybe by 1, 2, a little bit here and there, whatever. But we're going to break down for that first age group. If you want the full breakdown for the whole chart, if you visit my website, christopherchaos.com, I will have a little bit of a breakdown on there. There will be a link down in the description box down below to my website to get to that specific page if you want to check that out after this video. Without repeating all the changes, here's a little bit of the change. I mean, the main change is the ball throw is gone, right? People complained about getting rid of the ball throw as well, saying, oh, that was super easy, which isn't the intention, right? They say the ball throw doesn't matter how strong you are, it's based on your technique, because someone who's really strong but has bad technique is just going to make the ball go higher instead of further out. So it really kind of depended on your technique. So they scrubbed it because it didn't feel like it was a good test of your strength. Now, you also have these combat MOSs that if you are male or female, you have the same set standard, but there are still different standards based on your age. Whereas if you're in a non-combat MOS, right, like my old MOS, 88 Mike, you have a different standard compared to a combat MOS. Now, while everybody still has to score a minimum of 60 in every event, the overall total is a little bit different. If you're in a non-combat MOS, you have to score at least 300, which you can get away with doing 60 points in every event, and you'll be able to score 300. Where if you're in a combat MOS, if you do 60 across the board, you're not going to have enough because you have to do a minimum of 350. So that means you either have to get 70 in every event, or you have to get 60 in some and maybe 80 or 90 in other ones to be able to get that 350. Now, when I kind of show you the standards here in a minute on these charts, they are based on 60 points. But just note that if you are going into a combat MOS, you can't get 60 on every event. Otherwise, you're not going to pass the Army Fitness Test. So just looking at the baseline of 60 in every event, what does it look like though? So starting off, you have the max deadlift. You have to lift up some weight 3 times, and after you successfully do it 3 times, then you finish it, right? You tell them ahead of time how much weight you want to do. But if you're looking to pass this, you have to do a minimum of 60 points, which for women in a non-combat MOS, that's 120 pounds 3 times or more. And then for individuals like men or women in combat MOS or non-combat MOS men, 150 pounds 3 times. Next up, we're gonna have the hand release push-ups. You go all the way down, put your arms all the way out, and then go back up. So what are the standards for that? So for 60 points for women in a non-combat MOS, that's 11 hand release push-ups, but men in combat, non-combat, as well as women in a combat MOS, that's 15 hand release push-ups. Now we're looking at the sprint drag carry, and from what I've heard from a lot of soldiers that did this is the one that always kind of like wore them out the most, because if you're having to run back and forth and bring some weight with you, and so it's exhausting and makes it difficult to kind of move on to the next event, because if you tried really hard, you end up burning a lot of energy. So what are the new standards? So looking at scoring 60 points in this event for women in a non-combat MOS, that's 3 minutes and 15 seconds, whereas men as well as women in a combat MOS or even men in a non-combat MOS, 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Then you've got the plank, right? We got the legendary plank. However, with the plank, not too big of a difference. This actually is the same standard as it was on the ACFT, 1 minute and 30 seconds across the board for men, women, females. You know, in a combat MOS, non-combat MOS, it's the same. 130 was the 60 points minimum, even on the ACFT. So this one actually doesn't change. But then you move over the 2-mile run, and it's ridiculous that I always have to explain this to some individuals, but they're always complaining about still having the 2-mile run on the fitness test, because they're like, when would you ever have to run 2 miles in a combat zone? And that's not the intent of this on the test. The intent is to test your cardio, to see how good your cardio is, because they want to be able to know, hey, can you run from this building to this building? And then maybe you're checking for cover, and then you're running from this building to this building. And if you have to do that multiple times, you need to have good cardio for that. So this isn't a test to see if you can run 2 miles in a combat zone, because you're also not being tested by doing push-ups or by doing the plank, because you might have to do a plank in a combat zone. It's to test your overall cardio and physical abilities. And if you can meet the minimum standards of a 2-mile run in this type of environment, then probably in a combat zone, you probably can run from here to there and here to there and do these 3 to 5 second rushes and all that kind of stuff. Not to test to see if you'd be able to run 2 miles in a combat zone. But nonetheless, let's find out what are the standards for a 2 mile run on the AFT. So for 60 points for females in a non-combat MOS, that's 22 minutes and 55 seconds. Whereas if you are a female in a combat MOS or a male in a combat or non-combat MOS, you have 19 minutes and 57 seconds. You must finish that 2 mile run in. Now, one of the big things that people are probably arguing about is, oh, great, new fitness test. It's probably easier for everybody. Is that true? So we're going to compare the Army fitness test with the ACFT to get a good test of, is it actually harder or is it actually easier? Because usually that's the big comment that I usually see in these kind of videos is they're like, great, something changed. We're making it easier for everybody. Is that true though? Well, let's kind of dive into that. So let's start off with the maximum deadlift. All right. Is it easier or harder? So first we're looking at men in a combat MOS or even men in a non-combat MOS, as it's the same, right? For that 17 to 21 age group, it's harder, right? You have to lift 10 more pounds. So a little bit harder in that kind of sense. For females in a non-combat MOS, it's the same. Standards is the same, so you actually don't have any difference with that. What about females, though, in a combat MOS? Well, it's harder, as you have to lift 30 more pounds than you had to with the ACFT. So there we go. There's the first event, maximum deadlift. For females, at least in a combat MOS, it's harder. And even for men in non-combat MOSs or combat MOSs, a little bit harder. So let's move on to the next event then. Let's talk about the hand release push-ups. So for men in a combat MOS or non-combat MOS, harder. You have to do 5 more hand release push-ups than you had to do with the ACFT. Females in a non-combat MOS, a little bit harder. You have to do 1 more. It's not much harder, but I guess slightly harder. But for females in a combat MOS, of course, it's going to be harder because you have the same standards as the men. So you have to do 5 more than you had to do before with the ACFT. Now we're going to look at the next event, which is a sprint and drag carry. Men in a combat MOS and non-combat MOSs. It's the same. You actually have the same amount of time, so no change for that one. But females in a non-combat MOS, also the same. And then females in a combat MOS, a little harder, as you have 39 seconds faster you have to do because you have a little bit less time to be able to complete it in. So you have to be a little bit faster by 39 seconds. Now we're moving to the plank. The plank actually didn't change any, so it's pretty much the same standard time. So for the plank, it's the same across the board. So the plank isn't harder, it's not easier, it's the same as it was. But now we'll move to the 2-mile run. Did the 2-mile run get harder or did it get easier? So looking at men in a combat or non-combat MOS, it's harder. You get 2 minutes and 3 seconds less than you did with the ACFT. For females in a non-combat MOS, also harder. You get a little bit harder, I guess. You get 27 seconds less than you got to get that 60 points, right? And that's what all these are talking about, like for 60 points, right? Females in a combat MOS, harder. You get 3 minutes and 25 seconds less. So you have to be a little bit faster to get that 60 points. But again, if you're in a combat MOS, 60 points on every event isn't going to allow you to pass, as you're going to have to get that 350 overall. But people in a non-combat MOS could get away with doing 60 across the board. So in this case, I will say it's, for the most part, a little harder, at least a little bit harder, right? In some areas, it's the same. Some it's only a little bit harder, especially going to be harder for, I think, females that are going into combat MOSs or are currently in combat MOSs, as definitely I would say it's harder for those individuals. So if we're looking at it at any rate, right, for the females in combat MOSs, it's harder. For females in non-combat MOSs, maybe only a little bit harder than it was before on the ACFT. And then for men, probably a little bit harder. So the bigger one is probably the females in combat MOSs. So what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Do you think this is a good change? Do you think it's easier, harder, the same, right? I mean, based on the numbers, it is harder, right? So you're making the argument that it's easier. I mean, the numbers don't really show that it's easier in any event. It's either the same or harder. So unless you're trying to make the case that the ball throw was hard and so they got rid of it and now it's easier, which I wouldn't see that being the good case. But nonetheless, what are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comment section down below. What do you think of it? There's the standards though. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this. If you did, make sure you hit that thumbs up. If you want more Army related content or military related content in some cases, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching though. I'm Christopher Chaos and I'll see you next time. See ya.